All right, everybody, I'm gonna jump in here. Thank you all for attending both in person and online. I'm gonna turn it over to our sponsor, Christina Rose.
Hello, everyone. It feels really weird to be like in real life and on here too. But my name is Christina Rose. I'm a business branding and headshot photographer. That is what I specialize in. And just a quick question. I think that or raise your hand, I guess, if you know someone who is super awesome in real life, but maybe their online version of them does not match the super cool version of them. Yes? Well, can you see that? Okay, my screen, my peeps are down this way, but y'all can see that. Okay. So as you know, your brand, like your personal brand, is more than just your logo or what you do. It really does give people a feeling about you, right? And people choose what they're going to think about you within like a minute. So this woman right here is a lawyer in Roanoke, and the boss's wife had a really nice camera and came to do their headshots. So that's what you get. Brought a ring light and all. And then she hated it. Like, who are you going to hire? Are you going to hire this woman over here? Or are you going to hire the woman that looks polished and professional? Like, it's really, those were typically, like, mainly the same poses because they had to do that for their website or something. But it's really just posing, lighting, and just knowing how people look good. Okay, so if you want opportunities, whether it's clients, partnerships, recognition, your brand needs to speak for you before you're really able to speak for your brand. So here's just a few examples because you want to look good even when you're not in the room. So here's some common problems that I see. And I am definitely one of those people that notices it and thinks about it a little bit more. I know 100% that you guys probably notice it, but you maybe don't like process it. Your brain probably says something about it, but you don't say it out loud. So outdated or inconsistent visuals, like you want your brand to be consistent across all of the platforms. If you're opinionated about one thing on Facebook, like it or love it, that's going to follow you to LinkedIn. You know, you kind of need to be consistent about what you put out there. Photos that don't reflect your personality or your professional image, right? Because some people do really awesome things, but they don't have anything out there that kind of people would. I like to online stalk people, and I think other people do, right? So you want it to match. And then some people just have no clear strategy about what they're putting out there. And they're just kind of posting random things and hope that it hits. And I think this day and age, I think we can tell really quickly that the algorithm and things that actually get out to people does not work in our favor. So we have to learn to manipulate it ourselves. So what I do a little bit differently and what my hope is when I work with my clients, I don't want people to be like, oh my gosh, that's a Christina Rose photo. I don't want people to really, I don't need people or want people to be like, oh, I know who you worked with. That's not important to me. I want it to look like you. I want brand photos that reflect how you want to connect with your ideal client and how you want people to see you. So my goal isn't just to make you look good and feel confident. I want you showing up with purpose. Like I don't know if you guys have ever driven down Roanoke Street and seen Ty. What does he call himself? Ty, the real estate guy or something like that. He pays people money for houses. He's like one of those guys, and he really needed something to help him make sense of that. So he just did a quick headshot session, but I didn't want, we needed to make him stand out and look a little different. So all these people-ish do about the same thing, except for Jack, who just is awesome up there in the corner, being so cool. Okay, so some quick wins that you can do to make an impression is to stay consistent, build recognition. Your brand should be recognizable across kind of all platforms. Who is you? What do you do? Like, I'm sure that you can look at the middle guy. He is a real estate agent. Like, but what's his personality? Right? You know, like he's a little bit different than, say, some of these guys who do the same thing, but you can tell he's a good old country boy, you know, and that's his brand. So that's what he should have out there. He probably shouldn't be on a backdrop, you know, like trying to be consistent about what you have out there. I hear a lot of people say, I just need to lose this, or I want to fix this. Get in front of the camera before you feel ready, because confidence comes from action. And I think that people have a bad feeling about getting their photos made because they haven't had somebody coach them through what their pose would be and how they'll look good in camera. And then once you do that, that's going to give you confidence to want to do it again. It really does make a difference. Yesterday I had a great session with a woman that was like, I don't like any photos of me. And by the end of the session, she was like, can I get a full body? Because we figured out her pose. And then your headshot, I think we all know this, should look like the version of you that someone's going to meet tomorrow and not 10 years ago. A lot of people do that, yeah. I'm sure we could all raise our hand on that one. So if you are cooler in real life, for all the people that don't have teenagers or work with kids, IRL, if you are cooler in real life than you are online, that takes you to my contact me page. I would love for you to reach out, and if you know anybody, forward it on, and I'd love to connect.
Thank you, Christina, for coming. We'll see you later.
Yeah.
So I will throw it up to our presenter for the day. I want to say there are not enough nice things to say about Jean. I have served in a somewhat similar capacity. I was on the Emerging Leaders Advisory Board for the Montgomery Museum, while Jean served as the president, and I've seen the work that she's done firsthand through the museum through grants, but just reading her bio that she sent over, I was like, oh great, she is more qualified to do this than I thought. So that's incredible. So thank you, Jean, and please teach us.
Well, when you're an academic, you have to write grants. I mean, that's the only way you survive, you know, and I did that for 50 years, which I can't even believe I can say that. I've written grants for 50 years, but I have. First of all, I just want to say how much I admire people that are willing to get up early in the morning and come and talk about grant writing, and all of you online as well. Thank you very much for that. We don't have a lot of time today, so I can't really tell you everything, of course, about grant writing. But what I thought I would do is tell you what I've learned over 50 years of grant writing, the things that work and kind of don't work, and things mostly that will save you some time and effort, and mainly maybe give you more chances of success. I hope. Yeah. So I want to thank Alan for inviting me and for the Chamber for having me here. I really do appreciate it, and I hope it will be good for you too. Let me start with the bad news. The bad news is, in all this 50 years of grant writing, the current climate is tougher than it's been. Because a lot of the agencies that we get grants from, especially for nonprofits, have lost some people up to 50% of their funding. And so the money is just not there. That's been in the past. We just have to face that, you know. And that also means that because we can't get a lot of the state and federal grants that we used to be able to get, all of the private and corporate foundations are stressed because they're getting more and more people coming to them for money. So it's a really, really difficult climate. But you know, that means a lot of worthwhile grants and really worthwhile grants just won't get funded. But I want you to say, don't despair. Some will get funded. That's still going to happen. And maybe some of it will come back at some time. And even when you prepare a grant that gets turned down, or maybe even several, it still helps you with preparing the next one. There's always a great learning experience, and you can put it into the next one. And you probably then already have some verbiage and, you know, skeletal outline of what you want to do over and over. So that makes it really a little bit easier in the long term. On a lighter note, back in about 2018, I guess it was, an online grant advisor forum, I thought this was just, they did a very funny essay about the imbalance between funders and the people that write grants to them and the nonprofits, leading to what they said, no good, very bad things, such as not very honest communication between the funder and the people looking for grants, and especially on applications. We kind of get trained, they said, you know, to do a bunch of jargon or a lot of BS on grant applications because we kind of are, you know, we want to tell them what they want to hear. So they envisioned for a few minutes, what would it be like to be brutally honest if we had a chance on applications? And I think it's funny enough because it's so true. One is ask you a question like, what is innovative about your program? Oh, it's entirely innovative, unproven. The outcomes are unknown. Now we have a program that is tried and tested and we have solid evidence of the outcomes, but you funded it last year and you won't fund anything a second year in a row. So we just made this one up then to bring to you. And they end with, please send money. How will you sustain this program after the grant runs out? Well, we'll leave you alone, harass other foundations and so on, and then come back to you in about a year and hope that you've forgotten that we applied the last time. Please send money. How will you use the funds if you receive this grant? Well, honestly, we really want it to pay rent and utilities and wages for staff, but you don't allow those things to be paid for in the grant. So we'll waste hundreds of hours trying to figure out who's paying for what. Hours that we could be providing services for people. So please send unrestricted money, which almost never happens, of course. And how will you evaluate this program? Because we don't have funding for an external evaluator, we'll have Edward, our intern, design a report with lots of numbers and statistics, enough to convince you we have good evaluation data. Please send money so we can buy Edward a cake. How will the community be transformed as a result of this grant? Oh, that's a good one. It's good to know that grant funders have a sense of humor. This grant is for $5,000. If you really want to see transformation, add about 3 zeros to that. Please send those 3 zeros and then we might see transformation. So those are the kinds of things, I mean, they're all things we'd really love to say, really, truly, but we know that we can't. So what we're going to talk about a little bit this morning is let's concentrate on what you can say and how you say it. And I wanted to cover about 3 things. One is how to go about finding some grants that are right for you, which I've heard a lot of you say you need to do that. How you put together the application, and then how you do the reporting at the end of the grant, because that's equally important. And sometimes people don't think about that enough at the beginning. So actually finding grants is, I know, time consuming and seems complicated, but it's a lot easier these days because of the internet than it used to be. Way easier, because at least now you can just look things up. And there's all kind of services out there now that can help you with finding grants, like Virginia Grant Watch. And they go through and they provide, you have to pay subscriptions for these, but you go through and they have things that will be, you definitely can get them for something that's in Virginia. So they've already done that work for you. There's a foundation directory, which is online now, or you can see it in libraries, which lists every foundation and what they do and so on. So you can look at that. There's grants.gov, which tells you a lot about grants that are, from state, well, mostly federal government, but also some state government ones. And there is one called Federal Grant Practice, which is $639 for the subscription. It's very, very comprehensive, particularly about federal grants. But it is pricey. And let me just say too, I mean, government grants really, sometimes they're the right source for you to go to. But just remember, they are the worst ones in the world. I can tell you that to put together. And they're the worst ones for reporting. Absolutely. It'll take a lot of your time. But they are worth it sometimes because you can get a lot more money sometimes. Now, I don't know what the climate, again, there is going to be right now, whether so many of them cut back so much, you're not going to see as much federal money, but, still worth a try. There are also small business grants, because I thought some of the folks here would be involved in small business as opposed to nonprofits, which is mostly what I do. But if you go, places like the Big Dream Award from the United States Chamber of Commerce, And the US Chamber of Commerce has on its website, as you might know about, they list 100+ grants, and loan programs and so on. There's a FedEx small business grant contest, there's about 20 pages of grants for small businesses on inkbook.com. That's INC, book, one word.com. And even if you are a for-profit business, you might find a way to partner with a nonprofit that has a 501c3 and has a location and so on, that you can partner with them and get the money that way. And that's sometimes a good thing to do. They can become then, your fiscal agent and provide all the stuff that you have to for the grants and so on, but you can be partners with them to do that.
Gene, because so many in the room are nonprofits, what does that relationship look like as they're looking to work with small businesses? Is there a financial benefit to the nonprofit, or is it more about being a good steward?
Well, it could be both, Alan, actually. But I think, if you find a project that is somehow beneficial to both of you, then that's when you want to have a partnership with a small business. And I think that happens, sometimes. But also some people might just want to say, we'll be the fiscal agent because we believe in what you're doing, and it does fit. The nonprofit will usually need to feel like it fits the nonprofit's mission as well. But as long as it can fit in their mission, then they might be willing to do that with you. But I think that is an avenue maybe that some people don't explore enough, is the teaming up together and letting them be the fiscal. You have to have a nonprofit that's got the capacity, though, to be your fiscal agent. Some nonprofits just don't. It's a strain. So you got to have one that can actually do that.
Are there a lot of those tax ramifications for
Huh?
that? Or what is kind of the impact on the back end with taxes?
With what?
With a for-profit business working with a nonprofit, are there any complications there you find?
Well, of course there could be, if you don't get along with people, or you end up having different sets of values or something. But I think if you partner with somebody, you've got to know from the beginning if it's going to be right or not. I don't think the nonprofit would want to take you on if they didn't think that what you were doing matched their mission and so on, and they had the capacity to be the fiscal agent. And if they do then, and they see what you're doing as worthwhile, you shouldn't have too many problems.
They could pretty much choose to give the funds in any way. I own both, that's why. I have a for-profit dance studio and I run a nonprofit dance company. So I could choose to use the funds that I get through my nonprofit and put them to the studio.
Yeah.
If it fulfills them.
If you can make a case for it with the kind of grant that you're looking at, yeah, you could, see that that's a problem. I don't know, I don't know if that they would see that as a conflict of interest since you own both of them, but be worth looking into, I think. This is a thing that's only happened in recent years, but you have to also be a little bit wary of scams. That can happen too, really surprisingly, even in the grant world. And so you want to be careful about giving out any private information until you've thoroughly vetted to make sure that that is a real grant agency that is really going to take your information and keep it confidential and so forth. So be a little bit careful about that. And somebody was mentioning this earlier. If you find grants where the applications say they are by invitation only, well, unless you have a real way to get into that organization, you might as well forget it. It's a waste of your time. You just might as well break that one off, Now, sometimes you can find a way to get in. That sometimes can happen. Like the other day in the museum, I was talking with them about, I had a whole list of foundations that operate in the Blacksburg, Christiansburg River Valley area. These are private foundations. And I asked all the people on our board, do you know anybody? Do you know any of these people personally? Well, as it turned out, one of our board members did know somebody at 2 different ones of them. And so we now have set up a plan where those people are going to be invited to the museum, get a tour of the museum, talk about our programming, all that kind of stuff, through the person who knows them, and have them come over. And then we might be able to get an invitation to apply for a grant with them. So it's possible to do it, but like I said, if you don't have some way to get in, then it's pretty hard. Now, if you want to go for some of the corporate grants that say by invitation only, again, maybe if there's a local branch of that corporation and you know somebody there, they can get you in. That happened with us some years ago at the museum. We got a grant from Corning here because we got a big Corning plant. But to get to Corning, it's really at the corporate level. So you have to go through the local plant. So we did. We got together with the local plant people and talked with them and so on and showed them what we were trying to do. And they got an okay for us to apply to Corning then to get a grant. And we did. We got a grant from them. So you can do it that way. Banks sometimes are the same way. If you got your local Bank of America or Wells Fargo person or something, they can help you get into the corporate one. But you have to kind of work at that sometimes. And sometimes you just can't, you just write those off, you can't do it. Well, with all these, and there are lots of grant opportunities out there. Like I said, there's so many things online that you can look at now and things to help you. But what I recommend and what we do is, and I have for all my grant writing time, you set up a list of search terms. Go ahead and devise a list yourself or with your team of search terms that are for your particular projects that you're looking for money for. And you want those search terms to be both specific enough, but also expansive enough. So don't, limit yourself too much. I'll give you an example. Again, I'm using the museum because that's where I've been writing the most grants lately. Is we host the Montgomery Junior Appalachian Musicians Program. It's an after-school program for kids, 4th through 8th grade. Most of you know about it, I guess. It looks like you do. And they get a half-hour cultural enrichment about Appalachia, and then they get group lessons for an hour on either banjo, guitar, fiddle, bass, or a mandolin and dulcimer. So we write a lot of grants to support that program. And a lot of them, it's very easy, the list of search terms. You start off with things like music programs for young people, cultural enrichment program, for young people, getting instruments for kids, there's a place that you can apply for that. I mean, those kinds of things, of course, very easily come to your mind and you get those on your search terms. But we started thinking broader than that. So we thought, in part, it's about mental health and well-being for youngsters because they learn discipline, because they have to practice. They learn how to get along with the other kids. And that's another example. They learn a lot about themselves, about stage presence, all of these things that give them more confidence. So you can think, a little bit broader. So that's one part of it. Another one, we thought about how, again, the whole socialization thing, that all of these students don't go to the same school. They come from all over the New York Valley and to take the classes. So they get to know a bunch of, and some of them are homeschool children. They all kind of get to know each other and form some new relationships and friendships, which is wonderful. And we have a really diverse group of students. We have 2 youngsters, brother and sister from the Marshall Islands. They were adopted. And we have a young gal who's from Africa. Great fiddle player, by the way. She's learning to be. So it's a mixed bag. And so the kids learn to all get along together, So there's that whole thing that we can look for grants that work with socialization and community impact, because we're seeing that with the MJAM program, all the parents come together because they come for an open orientation. They come for the final recital at the end of each term. They bring the students in every day and have to check them in and check them out. And they've all started to get to know each other. And we have several of the parents who volunteer and work with us now. Some help teach and some help do other things with the program. And the youngsters now have been going out and performing for lots of civic groups and at all kinds of events and so on. So that's another thing. We can look at community impact of the program. So we did now widen our scope about what kinds of grants we might be able to look for. So like I said, try to be very specific about some things, but be pretty expansive in thinking about other things. But get yourself a good list of terms so that when you start searching on the internet or through these directories and so on, that you have, you know where you want to go, what you want to look at.
As so many in the room are also, they know their programs. Are there any suggestions you have for how to look at the programs from a different lens so that you can look at some of those other opportunities that may not be immediately created? So I'm going to use January, for example, where everything is fully focused, veteran focused, food security focused. How could she go about, is it talking to someone else to look at the program? Is it talking to other nonprofits and getting their insight to say, oh, well, aren't you also doing this? Just how do you suggest people go about that?
Well, I think you just said a couple of good things to that. Is if you work with a team of people, you might together sit down and brainstorm it and try to think as expansively as you can. And then you might, put everything down and then some of them you'll take out because, it's just not going to work, but be pretty expansive. Then talk to some other nonprofits, especially maybe some that do work somewhat similar to yours and see what they have to say about that.
Can you say a little bit more about search words for the community impact, or how you might what's another phrase you might use? Because if that is a question that's going to always be on the grants, like how does it impact the community, then give your good nuggets.
About how you say something to them about community impact, or how you look for a grant.
You would search for you mentioned community impact, but what's another way to phrase that that's slightly different that might get you something else that's saying the same thing?
Well, it could be community engagement. Come on, get ideas, everybody say. Let's brainstorm. I mean, that's the best way to come up with it.
Community development. Development.
Community development, absolutely.
Like I've got a grant open on my desk right now. It's like, that's exactly what it asks, is what, if you get this grant, how does it impact the
Right.
community?
And we're gonna talk about that.
It's like for us, we're increasing food security, improving access to healthy and nutritious food. So it's like you just kind of take a lot of times you do a reverse of what your focus is. And you say, okay, if I were to improve that, how do I write, like I'm dealing with food insecurity, isolation, low access to food. So I've increased access to healthy food, I've improved nutrition, I've improved mental health, and, that kind of thing.
I think it would be beneficial to ask someone that has benefited. Like one of your recipients that you have helped, instead of just the leadership team, what did this do for you? Because you might be surprised
That's
what they come up with,
Yeah.
because you think of the direct thing, and then likely it impacted their life in so many tertiary ways. So it'd be really interesting to utilize that.
Well, we collect that kind of information sort of about the museum after, not just with MGM, but with all the programming that we do. We ask people who participated in it last time to give us statements, or we'll get them a little response card or something. As we keep a lot of that, because then we've got some validation, to say that we have had community impact.
How has this changed their life? How has this changed your life?
If they're not worried about food, then they can go do things like get a job or volunteer themselves. Yeah.
We hear a
Improve
lot.
their
I could
mental health.
I could buy my medication this month because I had money for food. So,
There's so many like secondary benefits.
we get so many letters, and it's like, go back and be like, okay, how did this, we keep those.
So you can see if you do a little brainstorming, with not only people you're working with, but with some other folks, you begin to get some really good ideas like this that can help you think about it, how you might expand what you're going to be asking for, or grants that you don't think initially would apply to you, because you're looking so specifically for your subject area, your project area. It'll really help you to do some of that. So I do recommend that you do that. Now, when you find a potential list of, let's say, grants or funders that you want to look at, one of the first things you want to do is you want to read, and you think, well, these look like they might be the right ones. First thing to do is read really, really carefully all of their funding priorities, all of their requirements, because they'll usually have all that on their pages, of who they are, their mission, their submission deadlines, how much money they award, what are their reporting requirements. Read all of that carefully, because that might again help you either say, yeah, this looks good, or we can't really do this, we just really can't for whatever reasons. It might be that, you don't really align with their priorities, or it might be you don't have the capacity to do the kind of reporting and stuff that they want. You so read them all very, very carefully. And you might list factors from your organization that align with their priorities so that you see what they are. They say, well, it can only be in XYZ part of Virginia. Okay, well, maybe you fit that. It can only deal with, as you were pointing out earlier, young people, or this or that or the other. You got to do that. Do you align or do not align? And start to look and see if you really do fit at least some of their, you don't have to fit all of them, but as long as you fit something as part of their priorities, then you're pretty good to go with them. Because if you don't, they're likely just to throw them out. They don't have time to do that. And like I said, for you too, you don't want to waste time on ones that really don't fit. It's just not worth your effort. And you can find out pretty quickly whether you think it's going to be a good fit or not. And if you can't, like I said, if you don't have the capacity for meeting the deadlines or for doing the reporting requirements, if they don't give enough funding that you need, or they require matching funds and you don't have matching funds, you need to decide, right then and there, this is worth my time or not. And then if it's not, just quit.
What exactly does matching funds mean?
Well, if it varies from grant to grant. Sometimes they want you to have a 1-to-1 match. If they're going to give you $5,000, you've got to have $5,000 from some other source that you can prove that you got.
That you have, or that you're going to use on the project?
Well, but you guys, what is the source of that funding? Do you have that money? Do you have it as sometimes I'll let you have as in kind, because somebody is giving you of their time that's equal to that $5,000. Some will allow in kind. It's got to be a cash match, and they'll say usually if it's a cash match. And if it's a cash match, then you've got to say we've got $5,000 from this other sponsor who's helping with the project. They put in, or 2 sponsors put in $2,500 each. So we've got that cash, and that will match it. So sometimes you have to have that. And or like say, if you've got enough in kind, and they'll let you use that. But if you can't manage a match, especially if it's a cash match that you have to have, and you don't have it, you just might as well, not waste your time on that grant, is what I'm saying. Just don't.
So can you say you have a cash match if it's your own funding, but then not use it for a project? Or if you say you have a cash match?
Your cash match can be out of your own operating.
And then is it you're going to use it on that project, or are they just looking for you've got equity? That might be the wrong word.
It has to be, and almost all the grants will say it has to be on that project.
Okay, it has to
You
be
got a cash match for that project that you're asking them to give money to you for. Yeah.
Like for facade grants, we'll allow like if a business put in $5,000 of work already, they can use that as their match portion, because it's a 1-to-1 match. So like they can say, I show receipts to say I put $5,000 into painting the outside. Now I want to use that money as my match portion for whatever the project is.
Oh, so it can be work already done.
Well, it'll list it.
I
Like
started
ours
saying,
said-
I say sometimes.
Yeah, ours at least does that, like,
Okay.
as another option.
Okay,
but
great.
just-
Okay, that's another reason for reading
But
really carefully all of the
180
guidelines,
days.
you know?
Or no, I'm sorry, for using it.
Because they might say you cannot use any money that you have previously. It's got to be a cash match for this project.
We've got some for
Right.
Virginia tourism that we've
Yeah.
gone through that
Yeah.
it's like I've used it between May of 24 and September of 25. But we've had some of those that are also it's going to be used between September of 25 and May of 26, and I have to spend $5,000 in that time frame.
Yeah.
To count as a match. And it could be from funds that are ours, but it could also be a sponsor pays $5,000 and they're the cash match. You know,
Can you talk a little bit more about in kind? How that could kind of work?
Yeah. The ones that will allow you to do in kind, that's all really a big help.
Uh-huh.
Because sometimes you can count staff time, volunteer time that goes into it. You can count, really just some of your general operating expenses. A lot of them don't want to let you do that, but you can on some of them for in kind. You might have, well, I'll give you an example. We had a big grant to put in an elevator at the museum. It's an old building, it didn't have an elevator, so we weren't totally ADA accessible. And that's a killer too for a lot of grants if you're not. And there's a guy, I won't mention his name, but a very nice guy who's a very good contractor, electrical contractor, licensed contractor. And he has done all of the electrical wiring in the building for us at his cost. He doesn't charge us. Well, that's a huge in kind. We take the amount of time he's worked and what he usually would be paid for that. And that can be an in kind match for grant that we got for the elevator. So somebody who does service for you doesn't charge it. You know. So things like that can be in kind.
We started including, because people are like, what do you mean you don't have any? Like, we have a web host. They host our website, they do all of our updates, host my email and all that. They're like, we'll give you X amount of man hours, up to $3,000 per year.
There you go.
And at first we weren't counting that kind of thing. And
That is
I
good.
realized we have to count that, you know, because our accountant's like, actually, you have to count it as income and technically an expense, because you would have spent that money elsewhere to get that. And then our accountant is another in-kind who does all of our taxes for free and all our consulting.
Yeah, all those are good in kind things to do. Anybody who's providing you with some services and not charging you. And you, like I said, your own staff time, if they will allow it, you can do it. So yeah, those are all good things to look for with in kind. Yeah. And they're usually pretty specific about what you count as in kind and what you can't. You know, they're pretty most of the time, not always, but now I think once, like I said, when you decide on the one that you're really going to pursue now, let's say you've decided on one grant agency that you know you're going to go for, what you want to do is note the exact time and the date for the submission. And I say that because a lot of people, sometimes they're due at 5, something on this date at 5 o'clock, some are this date at midnight. But be very clear, because if you miss the deadline, you've wasted your whole effort, because they're not going to look at it, they're just going to throw it out. So be sure that you got that front and center, very clear. What you want to do then too is list their contact information if they have any for you to use, because if you got questions as you go through preparing the grant, then you have a way to write to them. And I'll say with a lot of the funding agencies, particularly that do nonprofits, they really can be a very big help, and they usually are willing to help you. I know, for example, we get a number of grants from the Virginia Commission for the Arts, because they have a touring artist program, and we of course bring them in for a couple. We have a big heritage music concert every year at the Center for the Arts and Tech, that the museum sponsors. And often we have people that are on their roster, and so they pay half of the artist fee. We have to pay the other half, but they pay half of it. And whenever we've had a problem about misunderstanding something they have written in the grant instructions or anything like that, I mean, I've gotten to be really good friends with Lo Bruner up there. She's the person who does the grants, and she's always willing to help. She never balks about it. And I remember for last year's Heritage Music Concert, we did it on international, intercultural influences in Appalachian music, and we had a guy, Kazunaba, came from Japan. He's played bluegrass for 50 years. And so we looked around, found grants, and I found the Japan Foundation of New York, sponsored intercultural exchanges with Japan. So we got money from them. But there were a lot of issues because he had to get his airline ticket there in yen, and we had to make sure that got translated into dollars. And I mean, it was really complicated as it turned out. But the people up there that we worked with, their main point person on the grants, was just nice as he could be and helped us in every kind of possible way. So make sure you've got a way to contact them. And they usually will tell you, and sometimes they'll say, we don't want you to contact us. That happens too, and you just can't. So there you go. And then what you can do is go ahead and set up your internet access to that foundation. Because normally you won't be able to see the application until you go ahead and set up an account. So you got to put in your name and your password. I mean, your username and password. And be sure and put those down someplace where you can find them easily. Because if you're writing a lot of grants, it gets really hard to remember which thing goes with which grant. So I keep a file. I keep both this kind of file as well as electronic, and I have a written file too, and for each grant. And in that grant, on the inside cover, I always write the username and password so that I can find it every time. And if you have to make a change in it, you can cross it out and make the new one. Make sure you've got it. Because really, that's something that will save you a lot of time, a lot of heartache. And I do recommend that you come up two kinds of files, one on each individual grant, but you need to have an electronic file, and I always have a printed file of your boilerplate information about your organization. Because they'll ask you the same questions over and over and over again on almost every grant. So you might as well have it. You have your full address, you have your mission statement written out. You've got, if you're a nonprofit, your EIN and your UEI numbers, that is your federal identifiers. Just have them written there, or in your electronic file. Your IRS letter that says you're a nonprofit. Your current operating budget. Your board of directors. Your federal and your Virginia W-9, both of them, because some state grants want the Virginia one and others want the federal one, some want both. Your most recent 99, your profit and loss statements. And oddly enough, sometimes your congressional districts, your local population and demographic statistics.
Quick question.
Uh-huh.
So a lot of the grants last year that we've always applied for added new sections on demographics.
Yes.
So we therefore had to add demographic data collection to our application because we didn't, half these people would never met, so we don't know.
Right.
But the application I have right now wants to know socioeconomic. And I'm like, okay, what's the difference?
Well, let me suggest some places like, for all of us around here, a really good place to go is New River Valley Regional Commission. There are kind of used to do a lot of work with the Appalachian Regional Commission. It's like our development district. They're the people here for this area, and they keep a lot of that kind of information. They've got statistics on, every kind of thing that you can read. So it's good just to go ahead and get those things, pull them out and put it into, make sure it's in your boilerplate, whatever you need to have about your organization. But these are the kinds of things they will ask you for over and over and over again. So it's good if you have them. You have to keep it updated, of course, because you'll have to put in, your current 990, your profit and loss. You'll have to put in any change in board members and, all of that. But just having it there, I can't tell you how much time that saves. Because you don't have to go looking for it every time. It's right there. So I definitely recommend that you do that. Now, when you get to actually writing the narrative part of the grant and you in the budget, sometimes that's a little trickier actually now, because all of that basic information usually is the grants will just ask you, what's this, what's this, you just put it in, really fast. Okay, that's fine. But then you have to get to the part where you have to write the stuff. You have to say things to them and work on the budget. And those things, like I said, are almost always, a little bit trickier for it. Now, when you prepare your application, the thing I always try to remind people is, remember, it's a rhetorical document. You are making an argument to somebody, a real person, real persons on the other end that you've got to convince. And also remember that there are people who, on the other end, usually a panel of reviewers or somebody like that, who've got to be reading this, real live human beings like yourself. And sometimes they have to read a whole lot of them. I have in my lifetime. I've been reviewer for National Endowment for Humanities grants and ARC grants and all kinds of things. And believe me, when you got a stack like this to read, you want to feel as you're reading that grant that there is some voice speaking to you in it, some personality a little bit, and it's not just kind of straight like somebody's dissertation or something, really truly. So you keep that in mind, that there's people there that are reading this. To have a voice speaking to them is important. Now it's harder these days because now pretty much all grants are online submissions and they give you a word and character count. You are limited to that. I hate the character count ones, but anyway, you get lots of those these days. And so it's a limitation. But what I suggest that you do, what I usually do, I write out what I want to say. Not in the grant submission place, but I just write it all out myself. I make a copy always of the application and keep it to do my writing on, but I want to do not loading it into their stuff yet at all. Because you want to make a boo-boo and hit send or something. So I write everything and then I edit down to where it's going to fit the word and character count. Usually that will help you pull out the things that really are the essential things that you want to say and make it have, a lot more punch than it would have. So I recommend that you do that.
Well, what are the spicy things you'd like to see?
Huh?
What are the spicy things that you like to see? What kind of piques people's interest when they're reading? Like a joke? Like what should you put in there? Like what? Right? Like if you're going to give it voice, what? Well, what's
I
going
will talk about that just a little bit. You
Okay.
want to make it sort of whenever you can, a little bit story-like. You want to, of course, think about every word that you use and make sure if there's another word that would be a little more compelling, it means the same thing. You might want to do that. It's more active. It's more convincing. Go ahead.
Are people, I would assume a new problem that is coming up is everyone is utilizing AI and then it sound exactly the same. Is that happening?
Yes, actually it is. And I would not use the AI myself. I really would not, because it will all sound the same. And it'll just be,
You'll think to yourself, oh, that's AI. You'll think, I would think to myself, like, oh,
It's like the
that's
fourth
AI.
thing in a row that had the same phrase, like,
Yeah. That doesn't work for me. It might work for you, but it doesn't really work for me. What you want to do when you're doing you're writing for yourself of these things is to be really clear and very consistent. And I mean, that means that in every part of the grant, as you go through, it all matches up, everything keeps matching up, it doesn't veer off in some other direction. You want to, it's okay to use personal pronouns. I think a lot of people think they can't in grants, but it's okay to say, we want to do this and our something or other, again, that sounds much more like a person talking to you. You want to overdo it, but it's okay to do that. You don't have to keep it so sterile that it's boring. Try not to use jargon unless you absolutely have to, because it's important to say something about the field that you're in. And that the people reading it understand that, but kind of otherwise stay away from it. And I always, after I get a grant written, I have many other people read it. Not just one, but several other people, and take their suggestions. And if you can get somebody to read it who's not involved in your project and doesn't know the field, get them to read it, because they'll say, I don't understand what this means, or this is not clear to me. And that is a big help. And so I always recommend it. I mean, you got to get it done early enough that people can have a chance to read it and to edit it. They're almost always, most every grant has kind of the same sections. They want you to talk about the need. What's the need for this? Why should we give you some money? What the problem is? How is your project design going to solve this problem or meet that need? What are going to be the outcomes or the results? I'll talk about that in a minute. They're a little tricky sometimes. And then they usually want to know how you're going to evaluate the impact of your project, and then of course the budget. Those are typically every single grant you have to do those. And if you're talking about, like I said, usually you can pretty much state what the need is most time and how your project's going to answer it, but make sure it really does answer what you set up as the need. Again, that's that consistency thing. Do that. I always found outcomes are sometimes a little more difficult, and sometimes people like to use this acronym SMART, S-M-A-R-T, that your outcomes are specific and they're measurable, they're achievable, they're reasonable, and they're time limited, because you kind of want to be sure that you can find a way to measure what you're doing, and sometimes that's difficult. It's for not sometimes you can give real numbers and say this project's going to affect 30 people. I find those things very difficult with a lot of nonprofit kind of projects. But what ways can you measure it? Is there some way you can measure the impact? Like if we've increased, let's say, our enrollment in the JAM program, by X number of students or something, we can at least do that as an outcome. But you really kind of have to think about those quite a bit.
What about the question that asks what your, not that you're, like how many people you impacted? So like in our case, I wrote a grant one time and they called me back and said, we don't understand your answer. They asked the same question twice. So I was like, I answered it the same way, because it was literally, there's only one word that made it, that was different. But it was like, what is your impact? And I'm like, well, we have 55 veterans in the program. They're like, yeah, but you feed them how often? And I'm like, well, like, how do you measure, what's the proper way to measure if I'm feeding the same 55 veterans for 52 weeks of the year? Is it 55 times 52? Or like, because it was, or she's like, or are you measuring how many meals you provided? Based on the average cost of a meal, based on the amount of money we've provided them with, we've supplied 4,550 meals. But then I've had other people look at that same number after they came back and said, this is how you should be calculating that. They told me that is wrong. So is there a general consensus on how I understand we've impacted 55 different individuals, but we've impacted them more. It's not like they came one time, got one gift card. They get gift cards 52 times. Mm-hmm. So is there a calculation that is
there's no one that will work for a great agency, believe me, because they are all sort of different about these things. But it sounds to me like you're pretty on track for what you're talking about, how to measure your impact with the number of people and how much that translates to this many meals and how much that translates to
Could
cost.
you just include like all of those metrics?
If you can, if there's room for you to, yeah, I think you should. Every way that you can, show them that you can measure the impact. But again, you get limited on space a lot of times and you gotta really decide how you're gonna do this. Didn't used to be the case so much. You used to write grants out, mail them, and so all different these days. It's trickier.
Gene, where that can run a numbers game because of how many grants someone may qualify for, and it all being very similar information. Is there anything people need to be looking at in terms of who's the overarching organization that way I'm not submitting two grants to two different funders that might be reviewed by the same person or the same panel? Is there anything like that people should be on the lookout for so they're not submitting almost the exact same information?
I don't think that happens real often, but I think it could, yeah. There could be an umbrella organization that's got a number of different grant, parts to it. And, you probably don't need to find the one that's the best fit for you and just do that. I don't think that happens really too often, though, actually. One thing when you're talking about the evaluation of impact too, and also the how you're going to measure things. It helps if you can sometimes mention if there are people on your staff or your board or someone that have some expertise that can help with these things. If there's a room, in the grant to do it, that can really help. Because I know when we were getting some grants to put in a new HVAC system to the building, the museum building, because it was old, outdated. And that's not good for museum collections at all. We couldn't control it, So we were writing some grants to do that. We were able to mention, I even had room to mention people by some names, blank board member, some of these people. Bob Poff was one of our board members, and he has, worked with commercial real estate and commercial buildings all the time. He was a building inspector, so he's there to give advice. Ernie Wade, I know some of you know him because he used to be part of the chamber, I think. He was a plant manager at Move Corporation, and he's a financial whiz, and he can keep track of all of that. When we're doing a project like that, like HVAC, or now with the elevator, where you got to have people that understand how to work with the contractors and stuff on it. And we can point out that we have that expertise on our board. They know how to do this and will be involved overseeing it. So if you can have a place where you can mention things like that, that really, really helps. A lot of times if we do art projects, we point out that we partner with the Blacksburg Regional Art Association. And that we have a couple of members of theirs on our board too. When we do the heritage music concerts, we always point out that we are partnered with Crooked Road, Virginia's Music Heritage Trail. So if you can work those things in and show that you've got the expertise, that really can help you a lot with those sections. How, with showing how you can meet the need because you got the expertise.
When a grant application asks who your community partners are, what are they referring to? Anyone who supported your program? Or what are they looking for with that?
They really want to know who it is that you're working with on this project, who is a partnership with you on the project. That's generally what they're wanting to know. And like I said, if you, sometimes, they will let you have letters of support. Sometimes they'll ask for letters. Sometimes they require you to have letters of support. Sometimes they just give you an opportunity to upload some things so you can have letters of support. And that's where you want to do some strategic thinking about who is the right person to write for this. Because just a sort of general one, oh yes, we support the museum and what they do in their programs and so on, nothing. I mean, it's great, but it's just cookie cutter and it's not going to make any kind of impression for the grant that you want. So I'll give you another example that we did just recently. We do this heritage music concert, like I said, at the Center for the Arts every year. And we decided this year that we were looking at grants and thinking about them, and we thought, well, Norfolk Southern Foundation would be a great place to go to because we're getting passenger rail coming back to Christiansburg, New River Valley. So they should have some reason to want to invest in the community. And this would be a great way to do that. And we can give them a lot of attention, like maybe presenting a sponsor of this and that and the other. So that's the way we put the whole grant together. And then we thought, well, we're going to get 3 letters of support. So thinking about that, I thought about the people that are on the New River Valley Transportation Authority, of course, because I figured they would have some influence on Norfolk Southern for sure. So I got, I don't think they mind me saying their names, I got Ray Smoot. And Ray is not only involved in that, but he's the vice president of the Virginia Transportation Board. I've got Kevin Bird, he's head of the New River Valley Regional Commission. He's been heavily involved in the whole process of bringing rail back to town. And Mayor Mike Barber, Mayor of Christiansburg, because he also is very involved in that whole process. And they all wrote really wonderful letters for us that we were able to attach to the grant. And we got the grant. So, but you need to think, who are the right people and whose voice will they listen to? And not, like I said, not just some sort of cookie cutter letter of support, but something that really, supports what you're trying to do, not just your overall general organization.
Can you get letters of support that are general and use them for different grants? Because, having to ask somebody, being a nobody and having to ask somebody once is hard enough, but then to have to ask them multiple times, are they really gonna do that?
Oh, some people will. You'd be surprised how much people are often willing to help you, but sometimes not. You want to overdo it. I mean, I wouldn't ask these 3. I only ask them because of this specific grant, and I try to look for people for every one that's, whatever that subject of that grant is. Now, yours would be, you're talking about the same over and over, right?
Yeah, probably.
But you might want to think about people that speak directly to your proven track record about doing this kind of work. You said you work with preventing PTSD, is that right? Or you might want to get some people that are in the know about that, like in, I don't know, physicians or Veterans Administration or something like that. Somebody specifically who can speak to that and how valuable that is. So try to find the people that, can give you the kind of specific letter that will really help you. Because I think it really does help. It really does help if you've got some strong voices. I'm pretty sure it did with Norfolk Southern. Let's talk just a few minutes about the budget. Usually funders are very specific about what they want on budget. They'll tell you what they allow, what they don't allow. And a lot of times they'll actually provide you with a budget format that you've got to follow, and you better follow it exactly. Or they'll throw it out or come back at you and say, you got to fix it, So you need to make sure that your budget matches exactly what you talked about in the project design about what you're going to do, so that they really do match up and that the costs are reasonable. That is, funders can see through if you've really got, say, a $5,000 project and you're asking for $10,000, they know there's a lot of padding stuff in there and they'll look for it. They know that. So, make sure it really is a reasonable cost that you get some good estimates for. And be sure you have only the allowable expenses. If they say no in-kind, don't put any in-kind. Yeah. Or if you got to have it, you got to put it in. And I would say that's, again, a place you want to get somebody that you think has a good financial head about these things to read it over. Maybe a couple of people at least. Does this budget seem to make sense? Do you understand it? So on, more than just your own eyes on it. Interestingly, the summary on most grants, and they almost all require you to write a summary. It comes at the beginning of the application. They'll want the summary of the project. But you, putting the grant together, you need to write that at the very end. Make sure you've done the whole grant application first before you think about writing the summary, because you want to make sure the summary actually summarizes what you've done, you know, in the grant. You want it to match up. And you want to spend some time really doing that, because often with some grant agencies, this will be the only part of the grant that they read. And they will make a decision right then and there whether to go on with it or throw it out. So it's extremely important. You've got to, again, find some way to grab attention when talking about your project. And they don't give you much space. But with the space you have, if you have enough space to do it, you want to try to kind of establish the credibility of your organization, state the problem very clearly, how you're going to solve that problem or that need. You don't have to go through all your outcomes, but what largely is going to be the outcome and the time frame it's going to be done, and put in the amount requested. And you have to remember too that if you get one of these grants, very often it's this statement that they, without the money part in there, they will pull out, and that's what they put on their website, is to say that this project got funded. So be thinking about that. When somebody else reading that really see what you're doing, and you know, think well of your organization and so on, because that often happens. That's what they're getting you to do, is write the blurb for them before they ever decide whether they're going to give you the grant or not. That's again a place where I say, write out everything you want to say there, and then edit. Get it down to what really seems to work. Because I just prefer to write everything I'd really like to say, and then figure out how to make it fit their word count in a way that takes the best parts of it out of there. So I think that works.
Question, and it, like, so this grant application I'm working on says, how much are you requesting for your project? And then in parentheses, it says, note that we normally do not give more than $10,000
Yes.
at a time. Is it appropriate to ask for the maximum? Like, so if my budget for the, you know, my project is for annual funding, you know, for the project. So it's like, let's say it's $120,000. Should I ask for $10,000 if they specifically state that that is their limit, or should I not seem greedy? Like, that's been
Okay, two things. One is, if they put on their website at all any listing of what they've funded in the past,
okay.
look at those carefully, and you can kind of get an idea of what they really give most of the time for projects. And especially if you see a project that's somewhat similar to yours, what's been kind of their level of giving, and that might help you. If you can justify all the costs, go for the max, you know, really. And a lot of times though, even if you do that, maybe they'll just give you less. They still might give you less. There are often funders who will say, well, we're not giving you the whole amount, but we give this amount. You know, sometimes that's okay too. But I would look at their history of funding, and then we'll give you kind of an idea, and think about how strong your argument is for, let's say, the $10,000 that you really can show you need it. But yeah, think about that one a little bit. Word of caution, most of these online applications that you've probably seen now, they have a place at the bottom where you can save the application before you submit it. So you can keep coming back to it and making some changes. Be sure, hit save every time while you're working on it. You know, I can't stress that enough, really. I mean, it's so easy to forget that. And if you do forget it, then you've lost a lot of the stuff that you worked to put in there, or what you just added will be lost. And you sure don't want to hit submit before you're ready to hit submit. So constantly look at that and be sure that you're saving and saving and saving. Okay, getting close, I know, on time. If they give you opportunities to upload supporting materials, and sometimes they ask you, of course, for specific supporting materials, like your profits and loss and all those kind of things, you have to upload. But if they let you also just put in some that you want to about your project, maybe there's been some media coverage of it, or you've got some photographs that would work, or, whatever the things might be, definitely take advantage of it. But select very carefully the kinds of things that you want to upload, and don't do too many. But make sure that they really help make your case for you. But it's good if they give you a chance to go ahead and put some things onto the grant that will help you.
Awards, would that be, could you put in awards you received?
Yes, you could, or you can mention that somewhere in your narrative, if you've got space to do that. As like I said, establishing the credibility of your group is very important too, as you go through as much as you can. But if there you want to just put it as an award, unless it was covered in the newspaper, or you've got the award letter and you think that's important, go ahead and attach that. Make sure they very clearly identify the files that you upload so that they know what they're getting. Allow adequate time before the deadline to get everything online and uploaded and so on, because I can't tell you, sometimes maybe you've looked at it 100 times, but then when you actually are entering this stuff on there, there are glitches with these online application things. And that's especially true of government grants. They are a bear sometimes. They don't work like they're supposed to. They just don't. So you think, oh, I'm just gonna, well, like Sherry, Sherry White, our executive director of the museum, I'll go ahead and we'll think we're just gonna upload this one just like super fast and hit send. Seems like there's always some kind of a glitch. And I remember way back when Casey Jenkins was still executive director at the museum, we were writing a very large Appalachian Regional Convention grant, which we did eventually, we got it, but I've written all the grant stuff, and like I said, they're beasts, those federal grants. And so we got ready to upload everything, the final thing, on there. And so I went over about 9 or 10 o'clock to the museum, and Casey and I thought, well, we're just going to upload it and whoop, we're done. Submit, over. I got there around 9 or 10, and I left at 6 o'clock that evening. It took us that long to get the thing loaded, because we kept running into all kinds of glitches in the system of the computer stuff. So don't wait till the last minute, because, that's problematic. Can be, definitely so. So before you hit submit, though, always be sure too that you have reviewed and reviewed, so that you don't miss anything, that you really have not forgotten, that you've forgotten to do something. You don't want it to be like the typo that's been through 45 iterations and it still got missed, you want to really carefully look at it. And I always say, we do this at the museum when we get ready to hit submit for one of them, because usually Sherry, me, or Lori, who's our public programs person, or somebody else, we're sitting there and we look at each other and say, ready to hit submit? And we go, yeah, okay. So you take a deep breath and you go, submit. And then go have a drink. That's my thing that I would suggest after that. Now, if the funder sends you an email saying that notifying that your grant has gotten there, that it's been received, save that. Make a copy of it, save it, so that there's ever any question about whether your grant got there on time. You got the answer for that. So definitely you want to keep that as part of your boilerplate stuff. And you be sure when you're first reading about these grants, they often will tell you about how long it takes for them to notify you and how they're going to notify you. Most of the time they'll do that. And be sure you've read that too and thought about it, so that if you don't hear from them for a long time, don't panic unnecessarily, since you know what the time frame is. And I finding they're getting slower and slower about these. I guess it's part of the times, If you get a notification that you've received the grant, the first thing to do, of course, is to celebrate it. You go like that and celebrate with your colleagues and so on. Okay, that's the first thing. Then what you want to do is thank the funder, if you can. Again, some will give you a way to do that, some won't. But if they have a way you can email to them, thank them, for being supportive. That always helps. Can be simple, but do that. And then after you do that kind of stuff, celebrating and thanking, then you need to make yourself a list of all of the requirements that they've sent. That is, how often do you have to do reporting, and what are the dates for the reporting? If it's more than one single report, or even if it is, what's the deadline? Is it 30 days after the project's finished, or how, whatever it is? Be sure that you know that. Be sure that you list how they say the funds are going to get dispersed and when they're going to get dispersed. They're all coming as a lump sum to you. You have to do some parts of the project to get the funding. You make sure that you have that information down. And any policies and procedures that they give you that you need to follow, be sure that you understand what those are. And that's, again, particularly true of government grants. They have a lot of policies and procedures that you have to go by. So make sure you know what all of those are so that you're keeping up with them when you go through the grant. They will also, a lot of funders these days, they will tell you not only how you have to do the reporting back to them at the end of the grant, but they also want to know they want to tell you how to acknowledge them as you go through the project. And some funders don't require that, but many of them do these days. They might tell you that they want their logo to be used. And what kinds of things they want it to be used. They might tell you specific verbiage. They want you to say about them. Be sure that you get all that information down, keep it on file, and keep tracking it as you go through the grant to make sure you're doing that. A lot of state agencies, again, like Virginia Commission for the Arts and Virginia Humanities and so on, that we get a lot of grants from, they are very specific about that. And you better be sure it's on every program, every press release, everything that you do. So make sure that you're doing it. And you should, from the very beginning, if you get awarded a grant, start accumulating what you need for the final reporting. It's not too soon to do that when you first find out that you get the grant. Can you have some things that might be used as uploads again? We have programs, from the concerts and things of that sort, photographs you might have, or news articles, or whatever it is, but start keeping all of that information so at the end you have it right ready to, and again, you don't have to go searching for things. If you don't get funded, stay calm. There are other opportunities, and you lose about as many grants as you get often. And I loved a quote that I read one time, said, if plan A fails, remember there are 25 more letters. It's true, when you go to plan B and then on and on. If the funder will allow it, and most of them don't these days, but they will, and you can find out what you could have done to make your project stronger, ask them, they'll give you some feedback. But like I said, most of them don't do this because of the volume they deal with today. And remember that no matter how worthwhile your project, how strong your application, it might be very strong, you still may not get funded. And for lots of reasons, again, it may just be the amount of grants that they're getting. It could be some bias among the reviewers. You can't really control that. There are many, many factors, but it's probably still a good grant application. So, if you don't get funded, like again, I said, take a deep breath, move on, have another drink. So those are the words of advice that I have, at least from 50 years of grant writing. And I'd be glad now to, again, any questions from you or any things that you've run into that you want to share with your colleagues here about grants.
About how long do you spend working on each individual grant?
A long time, but no, that's the short answer. But it depends a lot, again, on the grant, because some of them are very, very long and very convoluted and require, like the federal grants, they're really difficult. Others are just so straightforward, fairly easy, and you can do them in a pretty short time. But I spend lots of hours on every grant because we do try to be so careful about all of these things. So, and it's worth it in the long run. I think we get more grants that way, and it certainly saves us when I now have to go write another grant, so say the Virginia Commission on the Arts. I've done it now, and I've talked with them and stuff, and so now I know it's much easier, next time. And so that one can be a little bit shorter. If it's a brand new grant agency, it takes a little bit longer. It just varies, it really does. But it's time consuming. There's no doubt about it. If you do it right, it's time consuming. And I've evaluated some grants that done a lot of grant evaluations, and some of them are so carefully and wonderfully done, and some of them are pretty slapdash. And boy, you can tell the difference. You don't want to do that.
Do you have any like recommendations on like maybe a program or something we could take for the actual grant, just to like make our writing stronger, I guess?
Yeah, well, if you go online and look under let's say books about grant writing, there's some really wonderful ones, and lots of them right now. But there are lots of really good ones that can help you with that. There are some online webinars. Oh, and I meant to say that too. Sometimes the actual grant agency will have a webinar to talk about how to go about their grants. And if they have that, definitely take advantage of it. Again, the Appalachian Regional Commission, they almost always have some webinars about any grants that they have. And it's well worth listening to that and taking note of what they think is important. But there's quite a lot of those online. There are classes now on grant writing. There's everything out there in the world to help you if you just go do a little searching on the internet on grant writing.
I'm going to ask if there are any other questions, if you will send them along to me, marketing@montgomerycc.org. Even if you leave the room today and you realize, oh, I had that question, I can always get it along to Dr. Haskell. But thank you, Jean, for being here. A small token from the chamber for being here and presenting. Thank you so much. I wanted to share before we leave a couple of things that, as you talked about, that are resources you can still get to us here at the chamber. So talking about invite only, being in the room, we've got a lot of networking opportunities, but business after hours, eggs and issues are really great opportunities to meet people in the community, particular eggs and issues when you're talking about some of those decision makers at some of our corporate members. That's a great place to meet CEOs, owners, and everything that can help you get in that room where it happens. We do have, through your chamber master accounts, a news release function. It does not operate the same as when you send a press release to the newspaper, but when you get that grant awarded to you, they will usually tell you, hey, you can announce it on this date. Use that news release function through our chamber master account because it attaches to your business directory listing. And you mentioned the Regional Commission. I also want to mention Montgomery County Economic Development, the SBDC, and the Community Foundation of the NRV and the Roanoke Valleys. All really great opportunities for telling you what you can do with grants, but they can also suggest other grant and funding opportunities that you may be allowed for. And I want to point out the VTOP grants that come through some of our school and other work study grants as another opportunity that aren't going to be fully funding related, but can help you with some of your workforce development. So thank you again for being here. Thank you all for participating. Hope to see you at an upcoming Lunch and Learn, small business workshop, or business after hours. Thanks, everybody.